Good morning to our respected module teacher. My name is Lashmi Sharma with an enrollment number 183, and I will be the first presenter from our group number 5. We are basically going to talk about the central bank, and we have chosen to discuss on the Central Bank of America, that is Federal Reserve. And in this slide, there are the outlines of what we are going to cover in our presentation. And the first one is the brief background of Federal Reserve. Second, explain the function. Third, regulatory obligation. Fourth, the sources of revenues. And fifth one is the roles and responsibilities. And lastly, what type of problem are being solved by the Federal Reserve. So these are the outlines of our presentation, and I'll be talking about the history, like the brief background of Federal Reserve and the functions of Federal Reserve. The history of Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is the central bank of United States, as I said earlier. It is founded by an act of Congress in 1913. The Federal Reserve's primary purpose was to enhance the stability of the American banking system. And Federal Reserve was established with several goals in mind. Perhaps the most important was to bring the American banking system more stable. More stable meaning Federal Reserve attempted to deal with the inelastic currency problem by creating an entirely new currency, the Federal Reserve note, and a mechanism to get those notes quickly into circulation. There was also an act established based on the Federal Reserve, that's called Federal Reserve Act. The act established a system of reserve banks with capital provided by the member commercial banks in their designated territories. National banks were required to purchase the capital in the local reserve bank and thereby became a member of the system with access to loan and other service provided by the reserve bank. So with the aim to do away with these problems, Federal Reserve came into existence to eliminate the inelasticity of currency and to also eradicate the problems or the disputes the American banking was facing earlier. And the second one is I will be talking about the functions of the bank. The first function is to promote financial system stability. The Federal Reserve monitors financial system risks and also engages at home and abroad to help ensure the system supports a healthy economy for US households, communities and businesses. So, and the second one is supervising and regulating financial institutions and activities. The Fed promotes the safety and soundness of individual financial institutions and also monitors their impact on the financial system as a whole. So yeah, that's the second one. And the third one is fostering payment and settlement system safety and efficiency. The Fed works to promote a safe, efficient and accessible system for US dollar transactions. And the last one is promoting consumer product protection and community development. The Fed advances supervision, community reinvestment, and research to improve understanding of the impacts of financial services policies and also practices on the consumers and communities. So these are the few functions of Fed Reserve. So the second presentation will be continued by my friend. Thank you.
My name is Kingzon Ruxel Dorji, bearing an enrollment number 032000171, and I will be talking about regulatory obligations of Federal Reserve. To begin with, certain financial institutions are under the Federal Reserve's supervision, which includes monitoring, inspecting, and examining them to make sure they adhere to laws and regulations and conduct themselves in a safe and sound way. Establishing the guidelines within which financial institutions must function is referred to as regulation. As part of this, particular regulations and guidelines governing the establishment, management, pursuit, and acquisitions of the financial institutions must be issued. The Federal Reserve provides a wealth of resources to help banking institutions and the general public comprehend these regulations and the expectations they go along with them. The Federal Reserve evaluates the requests of approval to carry out various transactions, including mergers and acquisitions, and to engage in new activities made by bank holding companies, state member banks, savings and loan holding companies, foreign banking organizations, and of other entities and people. For, for violation of laws, rules, or regulations, unsafe or unsound practices, breaches of fiduciary duty, or contraventions of final orders, the Federal Reserve also takes official enforcement actions against regulated institutions.
Hello, I'm Karmacharan bearing enrollment number 032001110. I will be explaining the role and responsibilities of a Federal Reserve. The first one is conducting a monetary policy. The Federal Reserve sets US monetary policy to promote maximum employment and stable prices in the US economy. And the second is promoting financial system stability. The Federal Reserve monitors financial systems risks and engages at home and abroad to help ensure the system support a healthy economy for US households, communities and business. And the third one is supervising and regulating financial institutions and activities. The Federal Reserve promotes the safety and soundness of individual financial institutions and monitor their impact on financial systems as a whole. And the fourth one is fostering payment and settlement systems safely and efficiently. The Federal Reserve works to promote a safe, efficient, and accessible system for US dollars transaction. And finally, the last role and responsibility of Federal Reserve is promoting consumers' protections and communities' development. The Federal Reserve advances supervision, community reinvestments, and research to improve understanding of the impact of financial services policies and practices on consumers and communities. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Karmongar, bearing enrollment number 032001118, and I'll present the sources of revenue for Federal Reserve. Number one, individual and corporate taxes. The taxes they collect from individual and corporate becomes the revenue for Federal Reserve, and taxes that are dedicated to funding Social Security and Medicare. This revenue is used to fund a variety of goods, programs, and services to support the American public and pay interest incurred from borrowing. In addition to taxes, some other revenues for Federal Reserve are government revenues, custom duties, leases of government-owned land and buildings, the sale of natural resources, various usage of licensing fees, and payment to Federal Reserve agencies like the U.S. Department of Interior. Now, the next, I will present the some of the problems that U.S. central bank is facing. Number one, ignoring traditional economic guidelines. The number first problem is that the Federal Reserve is ignoring some of the traditional economic guidelines, because of which some issues are arising to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve's emergency lending programs bailed out insolvent banks, increased risks in the financial system, and magnified the credit crunch. Unconventional monetary policies of quantitative easing and paying banks interest on their reserves still cause economic distortion today. And next problem is that the Federal Reserve has been criticized as not meeting its goal of greater stability and low inflation.
This has led to a number of proposed changes, including advocacy of different policy rules or a democratic restructuring of these systems. This is our with this our presentation comes to the end, and thank you.